Hello everyone, I hope everyone is having a fantastic day. I am very excited to talk about the book I have here today. It is absolutely one of my top favorites I have read this year. It has impacted me a lot, emotionally has left quite an impression. I have actually stayed up until 4 a.m. reading it, and I was reading an electronic version that I borrowed from my library, but when I finished it I had to order a paperback copy because I just needed to be able to hold it, to browse through the pages, and to be able to reread it whenever I wanted to. This is Everything and the Moon by Julia Quinn. Now, I actually adore Julia Quinn's work. I find her a very creative writer. This book, however, is definitely one of my favorites by her. This is a beautiful, beautiful story, very romantic. Hit me right in the feels, guys. Anyways, we have Robert and Victoria. Robert is the son of an earl. Victoria is the daughter of a vicar. Obviously, they are from two completely different social classes, but they fall in love, and this is love at first sight. Actually, at the very start of the book, well, they fall in love pretty much right away. They're happy together, and when I first started reading it, I'm like, I'm not buying it. It's not quite realistic. I don't know if I'm enjoying it, but I stuck to it, and then the action begins, and it just gets so good, so angsty when you get to see the drama, the emotional suffering of the main characters, and eventually, of course, they make their way back together, and there is always happy ending because this is historical romance. There's always a happy ever after. So in this book, in the start of the book, Robert's father, who's the earl, he does not want Robert to be with a girl who's a vicar's daughter, and he pretty much tells Robert that hey, she only wants you for your title and your money. Now, Victoria's father tells Victoria that Robert only wants her for her body. He tells her that he's going to just use you for your body. He will never marry you. He will break your heart. He will ruin you. They don't want to believe their fathers. They are in love. They want to believe their heart. So they end up making a plan to run away to Scotland and get married in secret. And they plan to do it at night. So Robert comes to meet Victoria at their designated place, and he waits for hours. She never shows up. Now, what's happening at Victoria's house at the same time? She's all packed, all ready to go, but she remembers last minute that she has her mother's picture that she wants to take with her. Her mother has passed away when I believe she was a child. She sneaks to the living room to grab her mother's portrait, and she stumbles on something. She makes some noise by accident. Her father comes out, realizes she's packed, she's trying to run away. He goes crazy. He actually ties her up and pretty much, puts her to bed and tells her, you're staying right here, you're not going anywhere. Victoria has a younger sister who actually puts a blanket over Victoria to make sure Victoria doesn't freeze at night. And then their father proceeds to also tie up Victoria's younger sister so she doesn't help Victoria. When Robert waits for Victoria for hours and she doesn't come up, he actually sneaks to her house and looks in her window, and what he sees is Victoria in her bed asleep. Well, at least that's what he believes. In reality, Victoria was she was facing away, she was crying, and she was tied up under the covers, but what Robert sees is basically Victoria peacefully in bed. And that's when Robert realizes, or rather thinks, that his father was correct and she only wanted him for his money. I forgot to mention that before that, Robert mentioned Victoria that his father promised to disown him and basically leave no inheritance if he stays with Victoria. So he thinks, okay, now that she thinks if I marry her, I will have no money, so she decided not to go with me. She doesn't want me, she only wanted me for my money. That's what Robert thinks. He goes back to his place, tells his father, hey, you were correct, she only wanted me for my money. And the very next morning, he actually leaves for London. He's heartbroken. He leaves for London. Now, the next morning, or the next day, Victoria's father unties her, and when she's able, she runs to Robert's house. Robert is not there anymore, he's in London, but Robert's father actually wants to talk to Victoria, and he's like, oh, he's gone to London. Yeah, he didn't want you. So Victoria now thinks that her father was correct, that Robert only wanted her for her body, and when he didn't get her body, because they never got intimate, she thinks, okay, he didn't get my body, he didn't want me anymore. So now she's also heartbroken. Victoria also cannot forgive her father for pretty much abusing her, tying her up, and within a couple of weeks she gets away from there. She gets a position as a governess or something like that, so she begins her working life. And that's basically how part 1 ends. There is unfortunately this tragic misunderstanding between these two people who love each other. They are forced to separate by their fathers. Robert is in London, Victoria is now building her working life. Now fast forward, part 2, 7 years later, Victoria works as a governess for some rich family, and it just happens that Robert is there as a guest. They're having a party, and Victoria runs into Robert by accident in the garden in the late evening when there's no one else. And of course they recognize each other right away. They both still feel the chemistry, they both still want each other, they both absolutely heartbroken. Robert is extremely bitter. He pretty much tells her that, yeah, you shattered my heart, you showed me that women only want your money and your title, you taught me a lesson, never trust a woman. Victoria firmly believes that Robert only wanted her for her body, and that he was the one who was not honest. She's heartbroken. So they still have this massive misunderstanding. Victoria just wants to keep away from him. She works in that house as a governess. She needs that position because that's how she makes money. She can't be kicked out because then she would have no reference. She won't be able to find a job elsewhere. So her goal at this point is to just keep away from Robert, not get in his way, make sure she keeps her position. Robert, however, he realizes, hey, I still want this woman. I want some revenge. And it's actually interesting because we get to see his mixed feelings, because part of him actually wants a revenge. Part of him wants to hurt her because he was extremely hurt by her. Well, that's what he believes. But the other part of him wants to have her. So he gets this idea that he could make her his mistress. And at some point he saves Victoria from one of the other male guests who tries to force himself on her, and Robert tells her, like, hey, you're not safe here, you should come with me, you should be my mistress. Of course Victoria is insulted. She tells him, well, no way, and they separate once again. And what happens next is then Robert actually goes to see his father. His father talks about, Robert still being single, being miserable, because Robert was miserable this entire time, and his father recognizes it. So his father is like, you know what? Maybe I was wrong all those years ago. Maybe that girl, she did love you. Oh, by the way, she came looking for you. And Robert's like, what do you mean? So his father confesses that all that time, 7 years ago, when Robert left for London, Victoria actually came looking for him. And so he's like, you know, maybe she did love you, and maybe I was wrong, maybe I did make a mistake, I'm sorry. Robert is devastated. He goes to the house of the vicar, who's Victoria's father, who's not there, by the way, but Victoria's younger sister is there, and she recognizes Robert, of course, and Robert asks her what happened that night, and she's like, oh, you don't know? And she tells him that our father tied us up, Victoria wanted to go, I put a blanket over her because so she wouldn't be cold because she was tied up in bed. And Robert realizes that he had made a grave mistake. He assumed that Victoria chose not to go with him when in reality she was tied up. Robert is absolutely heartbroken. He realizes that they missed 7 years of their life. He realizes that he still loves her. So he goes back to that house where he was a guest, where he ran into Victoria, only to find out that her employer actually fired her, and the employer doesn't know where Victoria went after that. So Robert is devastated. He doesn't know how to find Victoria. Fast forward, Victoria is in London. She works as I believe at a modiste. She's a seamstress or something like that. And one day she has some customers who turn out to be Robert's family, Robert's aunt, Robert's young cousin. And when they're there, Robert also comes in and he meets Victoria once again. At that point, Robert knows what a mistake they made 7 years ago. Victoria still doesn't know anything about that. All she knows is that he left her and now he wants her to be his mistress, while all she wants is to have her independent life to prevent her heart from being broken again. Robert is trying to talk to her, she won't talk to him. It's a whole mess. Anyways, after that, she does kind of give Robert a chance to walk her home. She lives in a very rough neighborhood. There are thieves, there are some murders happening. Robert is not happy. He wants to take her away from there, but she refuses because she's trying to build her own life. She's paying for her room with her own money. She has a job. She just wants to build her life, keep her heart safe, you know. And then Robert comes up with a master plan. One time when he meets her after work to walk her home, it's raining or something, or it's dark. He offers to take her into his carriage. She agrees and she ends up falling asleep. And when she wakes up, she realizes that they are basically in the country, they are away from London, and he has abducted her. And then what happens is he takes her to his one of his houses in the countryside, and he tries to make his way back into her heart. And that's when Victoria is facing that internal conflict, because she realizes she still loves Robert, and she realizes that he loves her, but she's scared because at this point she wants to kind of have her independent life. She doesn't want him to own her, to tell her what to do. So there is that internal conflict she's facing, and then she also sees that he's heartbroken. He wants to be with her, and then there is, of course, a happy ending. This was pretty much a brief summary of the book. Of course, I'm missing a lot of the angst, I'm missing a lot of the emotions in this book, but the way I described it doesn't do it any justice. This book is a story of two people who were separated due to their father's wish, against their will, and they were forced to believe something that was not true. And then by accident, they came back into each other's lives and they had another chance 7 years later, because they never stopped loving each other. And this is a story of two people who have to learn to make their way back into each other's hearts, who most importantly have to let themselves uh, open up to that love again, to trust again. This is a very beautiful book. What really got to me was, of course, the fact that they were forced to separate, and then they had to, once they met again, they had those problems with trust. They had to learn to trust each other again, to let each other into their hearts. This is a beautiful read. Honestly, heartbreaking. Of course, there is a happy ending, thank God. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to read all these books if they didn't have a happy ending. Now, the name of the book, Everything in the Moon. What does the moon have to do with it? Well, the moon is actually referenced a lot throughout the book. For example, Victoria's mom passed away when she was pretty young, but Victoria still believes she's somewhere out there. She can feel her, and maybe she's even, when she sees the moon, maybe that's her mom, maybe that's when her mom is there. And then at the end, there's a very beautiful reference to the moon. They're in the carriage and he can see the moon outside, and he swears he can see the moon wink at him. So, Everything and the Moon. This is what Robert promises to give Victoria. Actually, in the start of the book, he tells her that he will give her everything and the moon. And then he reiterates on that statement later on in the book. This is a beautiful story. Robert truly does love Victoria very deeply with his whole heart, and Victoria loves him too. And I'm so happy that those two made their way back to each other. I highly recommend this book. When I read it, I rate my books out of 10. This book got 20 out of 10. I could not give it any lower than 20 out of 10, just because that's how I felt. This book has really impacted me. A beautiful, beautiful story. If you read this book, please let me know how you feel about it, whether you like it, whether you did not like it. This book comes from a 2-book series, the Lyndon sisters. Victoria's last name is Lyndon. The next book in the series is about her younger sister, Eleanor. I did not like Eleanor's story as much as I liked Victoria's story. This book is one of my favorites by Julia Quinn, and Robert's character is one of my favorite male character by Julia Quinn. I find him very funny and very charismatic. He has that kind of personality that I like to see in my male characters in the books, with specifically Julia Quinn's books, and I read all of her books. You know, the most popular series is the Bridgertons, of course. Well, Robert kind of has the Colin Bridgerton personality. I feel like every one of Quinn's series, one of the books in the series will have a male character with the Colin Bridgerton personality. Well, Robert is that, and I absolutely love to see that. He is very loyal, he's very passionate, he's funny, he's got the sense of humor. I recommend you read this book. Let me know what you think. Now, if you want me to review a specific book, let me know. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Enjoy whatever it is you have planned to do. Please give me a like and make sure to subscribe. I have big plans to review as many historical romances as possible. Stay tuned. Let's talk about historical romances. Bye.